Of course, of course, of course. Huh. 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 Oh. Wait, I'm not supposed to be showing this game yet. Whoa, wait, cancel this. Nope, no, don't look at those. Oh, stop watching, just stop watching. Don't look anymore, no. I'm actually not allowed to show you guys this game yet. But, on the day before release, I am allowed to stream it. So come by my stream, twitch.tv/absolutehabibi. Come watch me play Victoria 3 for the entire day before the release of launch. Holy crap! 34 hours! 15 hours! While streaming, one of the most asked questions I get is what do I think are the best ideas in the new EU4 patch? Well, this video, I'll give my opinion on every idea group in EU4 and rank them in a tier list format. Additionally, near the end of the video, I'll talk about the best full idea builds for multiplayer and world conquest runs. You can use chapters below to navigate freely throughout the video. Here we have a pretty standard tier list. There's two key differences than most of my other tier lists though. The first is that there's only S through C. I don't think any idea group deserves to be a D or an F. The other key difference is that there's a tier specifically for Naval and Maritime. You might be thinking it's because I think these are really bad idea groups that should never be taken, and you would be both wrong and right at the same time. I don't think they're bad idea groups for what they're intended to do, but I don't think you should ever be taking these ideas in 99% of your campaigns. Hear me out. Naval and Maritime are broken. Yeah, they're extremely powerful what they're intended to do. Naval makes your navy super strong, while Maritime makes your navy super big and far-reaching. Just look at Naval's idea of 25% galley combat ability, 20% heavy ship combat ability, morale of navies, and engagement width. That'd be like a military idea group giving 20% infantry combat ability, 20% artillery combat ability, while simultaneously giving morale of armies and combat width. Then you look at Maritime idea group, and it gives a 50% naval force limit and the ability for your ships to repair on coastal tiles, basically nullifying any coastal defenses someone may have. In combination together, facing off another player navally with these idea groups is almost impossible, which is why you'll see many multiplayer vanilla games that both these idea groups will be banned. However, that is against the player. In single player, I have not taken Naval or Maritime once in the last 2 years, and that's because even if you are against a Great Britain on very hard difficulty with both Naval and Maritime ideas, you can find wins to win a war against them without having either Naval or Maritime ideas. Whether it's using fleet rotations to outsmart an AI, or engaging their navy in one place and landing with a big cog fleet in another place, or just simply outnumbering them with sheer numbers. You don't need Naval or Maritime to win the war. Then you think, besides a really big strong navy and maybe some roleplay, what do these two idea groups give? And the simple answer to that question is nothing. Which is why Naval and Maritime go in their own tier. Super OP for what they're intended to do, but give nothing else besides what they're intended. Still though, super powerful, and there's a reason why in vanilla multiplayer lobbies, both of these idea groups will be banned. Alright, with Naval and Maritime out of the way, the next idea group we're going to talk about is admin ideas, a core idea group for world conquest due to the core creation cost of a whopping 25% and the 25% total governing capacity finisher, both amazing while conquering the world. There's also a nice 0.5 interest per annum, which can be considerable in early and mid stages of the campaign where you need to take debt to win wars and expand. The rest of the ideas in the group are varying from pretty good to mediocre. 3 of these ideas towards mercenaries, which are considerable if you are actually using mercenaries in your campaign, specifically the 15% maintenance reduction and 25% merc manpower. When looking at policies, there's 2 idea pairings that are very good. Admin paired with Indigenous ideas gives 10% dev cost reduction and minus 10 land maintenance cost. while with influence ideas gives minus 20% diplomatic annexation cost. Besides that, the rest of the policies are decent, but nothing super powerful. And finally, we look at admin's weakest point, which is events. There's not really any good admin idea events. All of them are just small, tiny modifiers. Of course, the wiki doesn't have every event tied with admin idea, but it does not have the super powerful national bank that economic has, or it doesn't have idea cost reduction like Humanist have. To me, this is its weakest point, but that's not really saying much when everything else about this idea group is really good and very good, especially for conquering. But just the fact that this idea group has minus 25% core cost reduction makes it a really good idea group and absolutely necessary if you're doing a world conquest. Remember, core cost reduction also decreases the time that it takes to core, except when it comes from absolutism or admin efficiency. But that's not the only scenario that I would take admin ideas. If I was doing a super tall build, I would take admin ideas near the end due to increased infrastructure, increasing governing capacity, or even a finisher in multiplayer since you state almost everything in multiplayer. And for that reason, admin ideas go into our first S tier idea group. Next on this list is aristocratic ideas, once considered the most useless or weakest military idea group. Now it's not so bad anymore in my opinion. Of course, aristocratic ideas were buffed heavily in the most recent patch, getting more cav cost, cav combat ability, as well as 5 dev costs and +1 leader siege. In my eyes, Paradox just kinda intended to make groups like Aristocratic, Plutocratic, Divine, etc. to be all around good ideas for each respective government type. So what did Paradox think kingdoms need? Well, horses of course. Jokes aside, this idea group is definitely a nice all-around group. Definitely won't make your troops stronger except for your cav, but there are some mana saving aspects to this group, such as the military tech cost, dev cost, and general cost that make it the best mil idea group when it comes to mana saving, or rather military mana saving. My problem with aristocratic is that since it does not boost your military quality outside of cav, I wouldn't take it in multiplayer unless doing some kind of meme cav build. And in single player, I really prioritize siege ability, force limit, manpower, which other idea groups do better. And to make it worse, there's no standout policies except for maybe minus 15% construction cost with expansion. And even its one bonus morale event has more prerequisites compared to other mill idea groups that we'll cover in this tier list, and it only gives 10 morale. But to me, this idea group is a strong B. Not the best idea group, but definitely not the weakest. Next is Divine Ideas, another all-around idea group. This one, in my opinion, is a bit better. This idea group has 2 military quality ideas and 10% morale of armies and minus 10 fire damage received, the only fire damage received that you'll see in any idea group. You have military quantity and 20% in true faith provinces, but usually if you are a theocracy, you're converting everything, so it's basically a 20% total manpower buff. Then you have 5% dev cost, 10 leader cost, minus 2 unrest, and a uniquely having minus 10 culture conversion cost, which only religious ideas have as well, making Divine Ideas really nice if you're doing a one culture run. Divine Ideas also have great policies, specifically with Espionage, which gives 20% siege ability, and Economic, which gives minus 5 core cost reduction and minus 5 years of separatism. Divine Ideas also have the insane coin flip pulse event that either gives you 25% morale of armies with 5 discipline, or minus 5 morale of armies and minus 5 discipline, making this idea group amazing for gamblers. To me, Divine Ideas is a good A tier idea group that seems to be a must-have for theocracies at some point in the game, both single and multiplayer campaign. And that's exactly where I'll be putting it. We are going through a lot of military idea groups here, but the next used to be a core idea group in multiplayer pre-deving meta, but now you don't really see it that much. This idea group is of course defensive ideas. To me, the idea group has some amazing military buffs in it, like 100% army tradition from battles, 15% morale of armies, 33% reinforced speed, and minus land maintenance. However, the other idea groups are quite lackluster, mostly focusing on attrition, which really doesn't have a big impact unless it's late game multiplayer. Make it worse, defensive has the worst policies out of all military idea groups, not really pairing with anything good in particular. But you can't mention defensive without its 5-year pulse event, Relentless Drill, which gives you an additional 15% of morale of armies for 10 years. I think defensive is a great idea for late game multiplayer and a must have if you have Elf military in Ambinar, if you even know what that is. However, I never see myself taking it in single player games in mostly every situation. The bonuses are nice, but aren't particularly amazing for conquest or really any single player scenario except for maybe morale stacking. To me, this makes it a low B tier idea group. The next idea I think is a very hyped up idea group for players who are doing very hard single player runs in World Conquest, and that is diplomatic ideas. Before we delve deep into diplomatic ideas, there are two particular modifiers that make diplomatic so good for conquest, and we have to talk about them. And that is the minus 20% province war score cost that isn't seen in any other idea group except for I think Indigenous, and the reduced loss of stability from political actions, making truce breaks not hurt so badly. Diplomatic has that going for it while also being exactly what you need as a small nation trying to expand very fast in the early game, especially in a region like the Holy Roman Empire. 2 early diplomats means that even if you're a duchy, you're not strapped on diplomats. +1 dip relations means an extra ally or vassal that you can have, which are important in the early game. An improved relations modifier, reduce aggressive expansion through improved relations, as well as make it easier to get AI to like you faster. While all of this giving +2 dip rep, making AI like you more and making diplo annexation faster. When talking about diplomatic policies, there aren't really any standout policies, but they do pair okay with admin, offensive, and humanist, giving dip rep and dip relations. And in terms of events, there's nothing standout at all. If we were ranking just on conquest or world conquest tier list of ideas, this would be up there in the S tier easily. However, in a way, it is situational and not necessary at all in multiplayer campaigns or very tall games. The lack of really good events and policies also don't help its case, and for that reason, I put it as a high A. And now to talk about every multiplayer's favorite idea group, economic. And despite the nerf to dev cost from 20% to 10%, as well as the policy nerf with quantity no longer giving dev cost, in my opinion, economic ideas are still pretty good. If we're talking about the most focused idea groups, definitely economic is up there, probably behind trade. This idea group does exactly what it says in the name, builds your economy. You have tax modifier, production modifier to give you more money. You have construction costs and dev costs to help you build up faster and more efficiently. You have inflation reduction to help reduce inflation from loans, gold mines, or boosting trade companies. You have minus interest to help you with the repaying of loans. You have reduced autonomy increase, which helps you take more titles, sell titles more often. And of course, you also have land maintenance reduction, so your army costs less to run. If you want to build up your nation and you have a limited amount of land, this is the idea group to go, and that's the reason why even now you still see it as the first 2 ideas in multiplayer. The policies on this idea group are really good as well. You get 5 discipline with the quality ideas, making quality economic a very good pairing in multiplayer. Horde power raising with horde ideas, which is nice if you're a horde. Artillery combat ability with offensive, which is good in the mid to late game after Tech 16, and trade efficiency and production efficiency with trade ideas. This idea group also has the really strong pulse event of National Bank, which isn't on the wiki for some reason, but it's an event that happens once per game and gives, I think, somewhere between 3 to 5 years of income, plus either inflation reduction or interest per annum. Only thing stopping me from putting this in the S tier though is that this idea isn't a must-have for most single player campaigns. I have never taken economic ideas while doing a world conquest and haven't used it for any of my harder achievement runs. The biggest downside being that it is an admin idea group, where admin, religious, humanist, or even innovative would have helped us more. But because of everything we mentioned, this is definitely a strong idea group right behind diplomatic. And now for almost every single player favorite idea group, innovative ideas. I think the intention behind this idea group when Paradox were designing the ideas is that this idea group will save mana and help you produce more of it, and that's exactly what it does with a -10 tech cost, free policies, institution spread broth, a no gain, and a whopping -25% advisor cost. Of course, the earlier you get this idea group, the earlier you benefit from its mana saving ways, making it stronger the earlier you get it. This is also the perfect idea group if you want to stack insane advisor cost. Adding this idea group with others such as Diplomatic, Plutocratic, and Influence will give you even more advisor costs through their policies. You can also really get a nice 15% infantry combat ability when added with quality ideas, making it good in multiplayer as a 5th, 6th, 4th idea group. And you can't forget the really interesting interaction with innovative ideas, that the more you go into innovative ideas, the higher odds you have of advisor related events occurring. Something completely unique to innovative ideas and something that not a lot of people know about. The only problem with this idea group is that it's an admin idea group. The same issue with economic ideas. In situations where you're conquesting a lot of AI land or need the Deus Vault CB from religious, you may feel that you really needed that admin idea group on something else, or even are admin starved in the early stages of the game due to spending a lot on coring. But in my eyes, I see this as a better idea group in most single player situations, and also a nice 4th idea or 6th idea in multiplayer situations. And for that reason, I put innovative as A tier, slightly above economic and slightly below diplomatic. Next are exploration and expansion ideas. I pair these two idea groups together because they are both the same essence of groups, which is colonization. Exploration helps you reach new unseen lands, while expansion helps you colonize them faster. And in many colonial games, you'll see yourself having both ideas taken. The problem I have with both of these ideas is that they're both not necessary to play colonial unless you take exploration and are rushing to areas or trying to spawn colonialism, as I proved in my Netherlands multiplayer campaign, where I got all of North America and Central America without taking either exploration or expansion ideas. Just conquer the land, lol. However, I will not rank these at the same level, as I do believe exploration ideas are better. They allow the ability to spawn colonialism institution, which if you save scum you can always get, and you have a nice 25% naval force limit modifier and the ability to fabricate on colonial lands for your colonies. There's only two situations where I think expansion is better than exploration, and the one is if you're trying to do some kind of trade company build where you're trying to stack as much autonomy and territory modifier, which I did in my Provence campaign. And the second is if you're Portugal, you have explorers that you start with as well as explorers through your mission tree, and you can go expansion first so you can colonize faster and then go exploration if you really want to. And this is even proved more in the policies. Exploration has better policies overall than expansion, and it even has a whopping 33% manpower with aristocratic ideas, the highest manpower modifier that you can get in any idea or policy after the quantity nerfs in the most recent patch. But like I said, you don't need these ideas to go colonial. You can just conquest colonial lands in Europa Universalis. And for that reason, I put expansion in C tier and exploration in low B tier. Next idea group is another classic when coming to big conquest single player runs, and that is influence ideas, an absolute vital idea group if you're doing any sort of personal union gameplay outside of Poland, Lithuania, and Castile Aragon, with its bonus to minus annexation cost, dip reputation, liberty desire, and dip relations. Influence ideas also help when conquesting, not using a CB like Imperialism or Deus Vault CB with its minus 50% unjustified demands. And the vassal force limit contribution is not bad as well. Don't forget this modifier counts for personal unions and colonies and can be stacked with crown colony buffs. Influence ideas also have great policies, giving you the ability to stack insane vassal force limit contribution. Still waiting for someone to do a crazy build with this, as you can reach something like 500 or 600% vassal force limit contribution. You also need, I think, the mandala system, the mandala system government type, which you can get in Southeast Asia, but also the annexation cost with admin, as we mentioned earlier, and its other policies aren't half bad either. This idea group is very focused, but in my opinion overlooked often by other idea groups like diplomatic or administrative. But the situational aspect of this keeps it at A tier idea, but a high A tier, probably one of the highest A tier idea groups. The reason why I don't put it in S tier is because I'm reserving S tier for idea groups that I see myself taking in almost every single game, whether it's single player or multiplayer. Talking about idea groups that I take almost every single campaign, and we will talk about offensive ideas. Personally, I take this idea group in almost every single player campaign, and I also take it in multiplayer campaigns, usually as my second or third military idea group. This idea group heavily buffs your generals, gives you 20% siege ability, which in single player is my favorite military modifier. The faster you siege, the faster the wars are over, especially if you aren't using ACB like Deus Vult. You'll get a nice 15% force limit, and this is the only group that has a special force limit modifier, making it great if you have a special unit like Winged Hussars, Banners, or Carillion Infantry. You also get 5 Discipline, the only idea group outside of Quality that has it, and Prestige from land battles, which in the late game can make you go from 0 to 100 Prestige in 2-3 big battles. This idea group also pairs super well with other idea groups, giving policies like -5 years of separatism and 1 unrest with humanist ideas, 10 siege ability and leader siege pip with innovative ideas, and +10 art compatibility with economic ideas. This idea group also has a morale event that gives 15% morale of armies for 10 years called Show Elan. Again, of course, this entire tier list is my personal opinion, as it usually is. But in my opinion, I really think that this is a strong S tier, probably one of the best best idea groups in EU4 in general. I see myself taking it always in single player campaigns, usually as my only military idea group. And in multiplayer campaigns, like I said earlier, it's very common to get this idea group as your 4th or 6th group, or whatever way you have it set up. But finish it off, offensive ideas, S tier idea, and I stand by it. Next up on the list is espionage ideas. This shifts us to a group that got most buffed, I think, in the recent patch. It's got 10 siege ability, -15% advisor cost, and it's pretty good. You could do a really nice build where you go offensive inno espionage, which gives you a bunch of siege ability as well as a lot of advisor cost. But it also has its share of useless ideas that I basically have no use for, like rebel support efficiency and foreign spy detection. I personally have never used the support rebel efficiency, even in the Teutonic Order campaign that I'm doing right now, as this video is being uploaded. There is a mission that gives Ottomans a bunch of Catholic provinces with high unrest. Even that doesn't break the AI. I don't think I've ever seen the AI, except for maybe Ming, just break from rebels. I think they've gotten a lot better at dealing with rebels. And for me, that's just kind of, the useless aspect of espionage. One thing to mention though, the vassal acceptance chance does make diplo vassalization considerably easier. The +15 vassal acceptance chance is basically like you have 150 trust with every single nation in the game when it comes to diplo vassalization, of course. And the -0.2 yearly corruption is great in late game scenarios where you're constantly heavily overextended. Out of all the policies for espionage, only 2 stand out to me. You can get a whopping 20% siege ability with divine ideas, making it a nice pairing with divine ideas, and you can get a nice 33% manpower with plutocratic ideas. But besides that, the rest of the policies a bit lackluster. You can also get some cav buffs with Horde and Aristocratic ideas if you're doing some kind of cav build. There's also no good events, no really special events. So in that category, it is also lackluster. To me, this went from a low C tier group to now a high B tier. The buffs are pretty nice, and all of the modifiers, they're good modifiers, just not in ways that you really think. The thing is though, I don't really think this idea group really excels in anything. Maybe you could argue that it does in rebel support efficiency, but in reality, It's not really like an amazing idea group, but it's not the worst either. And I definitely will put it ahead of Espionage and a high B tier. Our next idea group, Plutocratic, is another one of those government idea groups. Again, like I said, the design philosophy I think behind these idea groups was to be all around, give you good buffs for your respective government type. Of course, Plutocratic is for republics. You can only get it if you are a republic, unless you're playing modded EU4. And you can kind of tell that by just looking at its buffs. It gives the most economic buffs out of any military idea group, giving caravan power and 10% goods produced. Not bad at all. Gives 2 military quality bonuses, one being 10% morale of armies, less than defensive but the same as divine, and 5% merc discipline, which of course only affects mercenaries and only matters if you are making mercenaries. And this idea group has a nice 20% manpower modifier, manpower recovery speed modifier, sorry, which is the only one in idea groups besides quantity. When it comes to policies, there's one standout, which is the 33% manpower that you can pair with Espionage. But besides that, again, one of those more lackluster in terms of policies. And this mill idea does have a pulse event for morale of armies, but you do have to be at war, and it only gives 10% of morale of armies instead of 15% like offensive and defensive. To me, this isn't really the best idea group, and for a mill idea group, yeah, it gives you some nice eco bonuses, but is that really what you want when you take a mill idea group, right? There's admin and diplomatic idea groups that do better. Of course, if you're doing some kind of build where you really need your admin slots for other idea groups and you really need your diplo slots for diplo groups, but you also need money from somewhere, then Plutocratic can be a nice pairing if you're a republic. But to me, this is a B tier group, somewhere between defensive and aristocratic. Actually, just because of the 20% manpower recovery speed, I think I'll put it ahead of aristocratic. Next, we have humanist groups, back into idea groups that are good for world conquest. Yes, I love conquering the entire world. One of my personal favorite idea groups, albeit there's been many times where I take humanist ideas and I go, maybe I should have went religious, or maybe I should have went admin. To me, the biggest modifier on humanist idea comes in the minus 10 years of separatism, a whopping buff to conquesting that helps deal with rebels, especially in regions with many cultures or many tags, like the Indonesian islands or in Africa. Humanist also comes with a nice 30% improved relations, the highest in any idea, 10 idea cost reduction, minus 2 global unrest, and some tolerance buffs, which is essentially minus unrest on wrong religion provinces. This idea group is a must-have if you're not doing a lot of cultural or religious conversion, and even in those cases can be still very good for just overall buffs it gives. Humanist also has a unique pulse event that reduces cost of ideas for 10 years, which is why you may see me or other players take humanist ideas when there's an open idea slot and not enough mana to actually take the idea, since you can roll for the event without even taking a single idea of humanist. You can just put humanist there, wait for the event pops, take off humanist, put the idea group that you want. And when talking about policies, there's two standouts, the years of separatism with offensive that we already talked about, and the idea cost reduction with trade ideas. Overall, I think it's a great idea group, but not something that you would see every game. And I think there's an admin idea that is better in a lot of ways, and we'll talk about that one next. But for that reason, I put it in the A tier, just in the low A tier. Actually, I'd probably put it even over divine. Next are religious ideas, the better idea group I was just talking about, right? The special CB in this idea group pushes it straight to A tier alone. This could have crap ideas all over, but then have Deus Vault in it, and it would still be a low A tier. This CB is a great casus belli in the early and mid game. Before, basically pre-imperialism, it's a very nice CB, especially if you're going a religion that is like rare, like Hussite. That's a CB on all of your neighbors, always, because no one will ever go Hussite, right? It lets you conquer land, gives you reduced war cost on those land, and it also gives you no unjustified demands, meaning you don't need any claims to conquer anything. And that's without even mentioning the other ideas like missionary strength, yearly prestige, stab cost, tolerance of true faith, and culture conversion cost, all of which are very nice, related around conversion, religious conversion, and culture conversion. And you see this idea group a lot in multiplayer due to its two policies with quality and quantity, both giving morale, combined together giving 15% morale of armies, the same as defensive. But that's not the only good policies that you can get. You can get 10% goods produced with trade, shock damage and morale with divine, and 5 years of separatism with horde. This is a great idea set, and I take it in almost every campaign, whether it's multiplayer and single player, and for that reason it gets S tier between offensive and admin ideas. Now we talk about the most focused idea group in the game, and that is trade. Every single idea group in this idea is focused around trade in some aspect or another. It's the only idea group where it's like every single idea group does what is in its name. Like you have like religious that gives prestige. Of course, prestige I think gives missionary strength. I'm not really sure on that one. I know stab gives missionary strength, but that's besides the point. It's a very, very focused idea group. You want more trade income, you go trade ideas. To me, trade ideas are necessary in campaigns where it's not possible to get enough merchants. Of course, in EU4, there are other ways to get merchants besides ideas. There's one merchant from getting global trade. There's one merchant per trade company if you have over 51% control of land. And you also have merchant from colonies that get over 10 cities. Anyways, my whole point of that rant is that this idea group isn't always the best idea, and I feel like it's a big noob trap. A lot of people are like, I need merchants. Instead of thinking of other ways to get them, they just take trade ideas, taking one of their Diplo idea slots away from them and one idea slot away from them in total. The only times that I think that trade ideas are necessary is if you're doing some kind of super tall build, or if you are in multiplayer where you're stating everything. You want to just state everything, so you can't afford to do trade company. So since you're stating everything, you need the trade ideas. And it also has a really good pairing with quantity ideas, giving 20% goods produced modifier. Of course, if you're playing in a New World area, you can't TC New World land. So North America, South America, Australia, you can't TC them. So if a lot of your territory is in there, you might feel like you need trade ideas, which it is valid. There's been many times where I've seen someone's campaigns, when I review chatters campaigns, or even in my own campaigns where I took trade ideas and I go, I didn't really need this. I didn't really need this idea group. But hey, it has really good money policies. Again, 20% goods produced with quantity ideas, trade and production efficiency, idea cost with Humanist, and the list goes on. And for that reason, I'm putting trade in B+ tier. It's the reason why I don't put it in A is because it gets really overvalued more than it does. You don't always need this idea group. There's many ways to make money without this idea group, and there's many ways to get merchants without this idea group. And most of the time in single player runs where you're going wide, this is a waste of an idea group slot. The next two ideas we will talk about are quantity and quality. Quality first. Before the nerfs of the most recent patch, the multiplayer meta build was quantity, economic, then quality, then trade or religious, then offensive or defensive, then trade or religious. And the main reason why quality was so valued was because of the big boost of unit quality it gives, not only from the ideas it has, such as the infantry combat ability and artillery combat ability, but also the discipline and additional 5 discipline that you can get with the economic quality policy. Now that quantity got nerfed so much, and it's not really good to go quantity as your first 2 idea groups in multiplayer, the multiplayer builds all start with the same 2 ideas, quality and economic. I've explained this on my stream, but if you have discipline in your first half of your idea group, so you can unlock it with just 2 idea groups, and you have it in your religion, and let's say you also have a state, not Marathas, the other estate. No, it is actually the Marathas estate, but yes, if you stack all of these things, you can reach, with quality, you can reach really high discipline, like 140 discipline in the first 100 years in the game. If you don't believe me, try it out. Play as Vijayanagar, get with the Hindu Hindu faith, and then give the Marathas. This is the harder part, which most of you guys may struggle to do, but give the Marathas most of your crownland. But anyways, my point is, if you don't go quality in multiplayer, quality economic as your first two idea groups, you will have a huge quality issue when it comes to battles. There's a 10 discipline advantage, and it can be really problematic if you're not on the same boat as your opponent. Of course, this doesn't just apply to multiplayer, it also applies to single player. If you're trying to do a lot of discipline stacking, quality ideas are the way to go. And also, quality gives you some naval buffs, so you don't have to worry about naval buffs, and don't have to get naval maritime. You got some in quality. And of course, this idea group has great pairings. I already mentioned economic, that was the one I've been talking about the most. But also with innovative, it now gives 15% infantry combat ability, and religious, it gives siege ability and morale. This also has a pulse event for 2.5 discipline, as well as army professionalism, to give you even more discipline while discipline stack. But this is the end all be all for discipline stacking, and in my eyes, discipline is really good right now. It's been good ever since I think 1.32. Discipline has been always really good, but of course this idea group doesn't give you anything else except for quality, and is very specialized. Of course, it is necessary in every multiplayer campaign. In my eyes, you always will go quality, and it should be one of your first two idea groups, and the other one should be economic. And for that reason, I put quality in A tier, right above divine ideas. Next is quantity, one of the strongest ideas in the previous patch, now nerfed because of the manpower modifier going from 50% to 25%, force limit modifier going from 50 to 25%, and the policy with economic for dev costs completely reworked. I'll be honest though, I never saw this group as S tier even in the last patch. This idea group is good for having a lot of troops, but that's not always necessary or even needed in single player runs. Quality still helps a lot when it comes to making a lot of troops, even after the big nerfs. I think though that this idea group has gone from the end all be all of all quantity in EU4 to now being a situational pick that also relies on other ideas you go due to policies. Quantity has a 10% morale of armies policy with religious, 20% goods produced policy with trade, which by the way is the strongest eco modifier in the game, and additional land force limit modifiers with other ideas. Quantity after these big nerfs is definitely still not like an F tier, and I don't even see it as a C tier. It still does what it's intended to do really well. It gives you a lot of manpower, even though the manpower modifier is not as much, gives you force limit, and it does give you as well manpower recovery speed. The thing is though, you can definitely get a lot better idea picks and things in most single player runs, which makes me want to put this in a high C. I know I just said that it's not a C, but I'm gonna put it in the high C tier. Now we're reaching the end of this tier list, sad. But for our last two idea groups, we have two very situational groups that are based on government. Horde idea groups are a unique group for Horde nations and gives nice buffs throughout a wide Horde empire. There's also another way to get Horde idea group ideas by being the Holy Horde as Teutonic Orders in the latest version of EU4. There's a huge minus 33% cav cost and 10% cav ratio modifier to boost, making it very valuable for hordes who actually will have mostly cav armies, unlike Aristocratic where kingdoms don't necessarily need cav armies. There are also 4 government ideas in this idea group, with an aggressive expansion modifier, making a nice pairing with Espionage. There's a religious unity modifier, making a nice pair with Humanist, as well as unrest and accepted cultures, making even better with Humanist. There's also caravan power for small eco bonus and a big 25% cav combat ability as a finisher. There's a lot in this idea group that really help out with a wide horde nation, although it struggles in the same way the other government locked idea group struggles, in that it does a bunch of things but nothing really super duper well, except for cavalry of course. But that does fit hordes more than it does kingdoms with Aristocratic, like I just mentioned. Where this idea shines even more though is in its policies. With economic, it gives raising power and horde unity, which is very useful with hordes. A policy also with religious that gives -5 years of separatism, which means this idea group is stacked with humanist, religious, and offensive. You can reach -20 years of separatism. That's 5 years away from the max amount that you can get. Insanity. And absolutely huge for a world conquest run, as you can basically say goodbye to separatist rebels. And for that reason, I put this as a strong A group idea right behind Humanist. And finally, to finish things off, we have an idea group that I've literally never taken. And that's not because it's bad. It's simply because I've never played a North American tribe or an Australian tribe since this idea group was introduced. This idea group, Indigenous Ideas, is for specifically tribal governments in North America. I think some in South America can take it. The Peruvians can't take it, and like the Incans can't take it, and I know the Central Americans can't take it, but I know North Americans can take it. I know Australians can take it. Maybe some tribes in South America can take it as well. But let's look at this one together, one idea at a time, since it's something that I don't have personal experience with. There's 5% dev cost and 0.1 tribal development growth, +1 attrition for enemies, 25% monthly reform progress. The only reform progress idea that I can think of, actually. 10 morale of armies, 15% manpower, 10 idea cost reduction, 20% province war score cost, and 25 institution spread. Dang, boy! This idea is actually quite stacked. Quite indeed. And just looking at the ideas alone, this idea group already is better than any of the other government-based idea groups, giving you dev cost, manpower, province war score cost, morale, reform progress score, all in the same idea group. Two of those modifiers, which are very rare, the reform progress and province war score. And it doesn't just stop there. The policies on this bad boy are insane, with 10 dev cost and -10 land maintenance cost with administrative ideas, dev cost and institution spread with innovative ideas, 15 construction costs with expansion, 10 morale of armies, and 2.5 discipline with exploration ideas. Two great pairings, as I think if you are in North America or Australia, you're definitely going to be taking exploration or expansion at some point. And the events for this bad boy, not that bad at all. I've never played with these idea groups before, but on paper this looks like a high tier group, just on the verge of becoming an S tier group. Actually, I'll even go and say it, this is a low S tier group. I think that if you're a nation that can take it, you should definitely take these idea groups, probably even as your first idea group. And I think that was the intention when Paradox designed this idea group, is to help tribes in in the North America and Australia that is played by a player catch up to the AIs around the world and become powerful as well. Of course, this does mean that this is the end of our tier list. And puts us at the very end of our tier list right here. Of course, remember that this is my opinion. If you have differing opinions or you disagree with me, write down in the comments. Let's have this discussion. Let's talk it out. But now let's get into some finished idea builds that we can talk about, some nice idea builds that we can do. Start, we have a very simple quality morale discipline stacking build. Of course, with quality economic, you got discipline, 10 discipline there, and then another 5 discipline from offensive. Very, very simple. Of course, you also got innovative in there for a nice, also 15% infantry combat ability, putting it at 25% combat ability, not even considering national ideas or any other modifiers you have. Here is what I call a world conquest build. Of course, you can change where you put these idea groups. Some prefer religious very first, so they get the Deus Vult CB immediately. It really depends on what region you're in. Some people prefer admin ideas earlier. Some people would prefer diplomatic ideas earlier. Some people, if you're doing a lot of PUs early, influence ideas earlier is really good too. But this right here, I would say, is like a very good overall idea group for doing a world conquest. Here we have a nice multiplayer campaign build. As you can see, we have 4 mil idea groups, which is pretty standard when you're playing military ideas. Here we have a nice Horde world conquest build. This one's different, as we start with a Horde. We're gonna, of course, have Horde ideas first. Humanist, religious are interchangeable. You can also do offensive a bit earlier if you want. You can also put offensive later and put admin earlier or diplomatic earlier for the war score cost and the core creation cost. You can also pair this with economic if you want at some point for more power raising gain. If you're also struggling in the economic aspect of your nation and you really want to build up certain parts, yeah, you can go also economic ideas as well. The next is the insane cav damage build. Of course, you have to start as a horde as this one, then reform into a kingdom. You don't lose the horde ideas, by the way, if you reform. And with this build, you are at 95% cav combat ability. What you can do with this is insane. Of course, if you can somehow reform Poland, you can get even higher cav combat ability, I believe. No, actually. Because it's nerfed. It's no longer 33. But hey, that's 95% cav combat ability without really doing anything exploity or anything crazy at all, actually. If somehow, as Ava, we conquered this region, let's just integrate that, then we integrated this, made this our capital, unstated this, make Tibetan our main culture. We also have to change our religion to Vajrayana. But if we do all of this, we can form the Tibetan nation, which gives us a new mission tree. And in this mission tree, we need 10 provinces in the Altaic or Sino-Altaic culture, which is the same as the Oirat. So if you conquer Chagatai, you can also have an ally. You can just be allied to a steppe horde with 100 development, by the way. Well, one of them with Altaic culture group. So if Oirat gets big in your game, you can just ally them without conquering. You get this event, meeting with the Khans. And we can either establish a rapport with the Khans, keep staying as a monarchy, or we can invite the Oirats or the Khalkha to rule our nation. You can also invite the Zungars, but that's later in the game. But yeah, you can offer Mongols, Oirats, or the Zungars to rule your nation, and if you do that, you're now a horde. You're now a horde with all of your reform progress, which means that you can take horde ideas, giving you vassal force limit. But then you're saying, well, wait, you don't have your special government type anymore. Well, okay, after we get horde ideas, we go back into becoming a monarchy, and we just take the mandala system again. And now we're at 600% vassal force limit contribution. Here is a I will siege everything in 5 days build, where you will siege everything very, very fast. Of course, in this example, we also have full army professionalism and full army tradition. But the combination of these ideas gives us 3 policies, giving us 40 siege ability that way, 10 siege ability from espionage ideas, 20 siege ability from offensive ideas, and the rest coming from army. These are just some of the builds that you can do with the idea groups of Europa Universalis. And the fact that none of the idea groups fall into the D or the F tier means that there's always some campaign where you could use these idea groups in some way or another. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this in the end, is that it's not really about the ideas themselves, but it's about your campaign, and it's about how you use them. Of course, the Deus Vault CB is useless if you never use it, for example, if you're a horde, and the economic bonuses aren't that useful if you already have a big economy. Likewise, do you really need admin ideas early if you're not really doing a lot of coring and you're just playing really tall? Maybe later for the governing capacity, but hey, that's just something to think about. And I hope that you watch this. If you watched all of this, thank you for watching it all the way through. Thank you so much. But I hope that you learned a lot and you can use this video as a tool to help you make your builds in the future and help you decide which ideas to go.